Rev up your engine. Now people say you can't get a decent car for $500. Well, this guy begs to differ. He just paid $500 for this Scion. Now sure, it's got dings on the side here, but that doesn't make it run any different. It came with the dings and this really wacky gear shift handle. I don't know about that, neither does he. His friend put it on. Now, interesting enough, this is his beater work car. His other car is a Lotus. No lie, it's an actual Lotus. He doesn't put mileage on it, right? As we look under the hood, the interesting thing is both of them have Toyota engines in them. And yes, this is the infamous 4-cylinder 2.4 engine that does burn oil. It burns in between oil changes like a couple of quarts. So, you know, it's burning a little bit less than a quart every 1,000 miles. It still runs fine. It's because they didn't make the piston rings correctly on these. My grandson's got my son's original car, 07 Camry. Got the same engine, burns about the same amount of oil, but it still runs, goes down the road. Yeah, you got to change the spark plugs once in a while because they carbon up. But even that's 20, 30,000 miles before you got to change the things. For $500, you know, you can't look a gift horse in the mouth if you want a knock around work car. He's putting 1,000 miles a week on his car as his commuting car. If he can get away with that and not put that kind of mileage on his Lotus, hey, he's really happy with that. Plus, think, it's an old Scion. You know what else is cheap on it? It fills up with $28 worth of gas, and his insurance only runs $40 a month, and that's full coverage. Now, I wouldn't put full coverage, but he's got full coverage on his other stuff, on his Lotus. You know, when you add stuff on, it isn't all that expensive, so you'll be safe knowing if you hit somebody, they're going to pay for the stuff too. Or if somebody hits you, he'd make money on that deal because he only paid $500 for the thing. He's probably daring people to hit him, you know? Come hit me. My grandson's daring somebody to hit him in a Camry so he can make some money on it. It's a win-win situation with one of these. He had a root canal done yesterday, so basically the money he saved on the car, he's spending on his teeth. Typical Toyota. Starts right up. And even though it's burning oil, they still sound normal. They run normal. They just made the oil control rings bad, so they burn oil. Now, if they would have ruined the actual compression rings, they'd run like crap. But the compression rings are okay, so they run fine. They still get great gas mileage. It's just they burn oil because the oil control rings weren't made right. Toyota fixed some, not others, kind of higgly-piggly. They're not going to fix this thing now, but hey, oil's cheap. So he's got to put 2 quarts of oil in every month because he drives like 7,000 miles every month. So not that big of a deal. Oil's cheap, right? And as long as you keep it in. The only reason these engines blow is because people are used to Toyotas. I had a customer in Houston that ruined an engine that way because she had a Toyota Camry with the same 2.4 liter engine, right? She was so used to Toyotas, she never ever checked the oil, right? Well, it was burning a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. She brought it to me and said, oh, she towed it in actually. Said, what's wrong? I started up, clang, clang, I turned it off, checked the dipstick, and there was not only no oil on the dipstick, which doesn't always mean that much. You can still have 2-3 quarts left, but when I drained the oil out of the engine, 3 glasses of oil came out that were thick and gooey. She said, well, I just had it changed in June, right? And this was September. So it was almost completely out of oil. She got another car. It was all kind of beat up looking anyways. Paint was faded. She wasn't that great driver. Was always hitting things and stuff, right? If she would have checked it and added oil, she could still be driving the thing because it's the lack of oil that destroys them, not the fact that they burn oil. As long as you add it, it'd be like a car, let's say, you're cheap and you got a leak in your radiator. As long as you keep filling the coolant and the temperature gauge doesn't get hot, you can still drive it that way, right? But if you don't add the water as it goes away, you'll blow the engine from overheating. And sure, hers was destroyed from bare metal, lack of lubrication. So it's not like they're terrible, it's just they burn oil and you gotta put oil in them. This thing was pretty solid made because they're made in Japan. It's got a really reliable automatic transmission. It's a 4-speed overdrive tranny, and you can see cloth seats are still in excellent shape. Now we're inside the trunk, and he's got a spare oil. He's not stupid, you know. These little hatches are so convenient. Now, I know they have a big trunk, but when you put those seats down, you could sleep in one of these things if you want. These were really well-designed cars. Look, back in the day, you actually get a spare tire. They don't say, oh, well, just have an air pump to pump it up if you get a nail or something. You get a spare. Yeah, it's a donut spare, but still, it's a spare tire. Now, see how many miles it has on it? It's got 169,166. For 500 bucks, you really can't go wrong, you know? So we know it's a Scion TC 2005 with the 2-way ZFE engine. Scan through it all while it's scanning. Hey, the nice black and silver dash is still in decent shape. And it's a nice setup, the speedometer, the tachometer. Hey, and the seats are still comfortable. That's the thing about Scions. They made it for kids. They wanted them sporty, so they got really comfortable seats that held up really good over time. As you can see, it's a typical Toyota product. They don't have any codes at all, so what we're going to do is start her up. And we're going to look at live data. Remember, black is good, other colors are bad. We'll see what kind of shape this thing is in. Mass airflow sensor is good. It's a 2.5 liter engine. That's pretty close. 2.6, 2.59. That's working perfectly fine. Here is the fuel trim, oxygen fuel trim. It's 99.15. And the air fuel trim on bank 1 is 0.99. Now it's perfect, it's 1. If this was 100, it would be perfect. And if that was 1, it's perfect. So that's off 1/100th, and that's off 0.85 of 1%. So for a car that's pushing 20 years old, almost perfection, air fuel ratio, you really can't complain, even though it's burning oil. That doesn't affect how it runs. See, it's a Toyota, so the misfires are all zeros. The fuel trim is 1.012. All right, 1 is perfect. So, I mean, man alive, you're talking about 0.088 off. Transmission data's good. The one thing about that 2.4 engine, it may burn oil, but they're pretty zippy little engines. I remember when they first came out, a customer brought me one and he actually thought he had a V8 engine in the car. I said, no, it's just a 4-cylinder. It's just that the car isn't all that big, so it's pretty zippy. And these things are always kind of fun to drive around. They were made more sporty for the young people. But it was a marketing failure for Toyota. I could have told them that in the first place. Look, Toyota's always had a great name. Why the heck would you want to get rid of the name and make up Scion? Well, the young people aren't stupid. They knew that Toyotas didn't break down, so they would have bought them anyways. And now, hey, they're making the same cars, but they call them Toyotas. It was a big mistake, wasted a lot of money, and hey, there was nothing wrong with the cars other than those piston rings. That was just a design flaw. But that made no difference. They had the same engines in the Camry. They made the same mistake. It was just kind of dumb to make another range of cars when it wasn't needed. Now, I can understand why Hyundai decided no longer Hyundai Genesis. Genesis will be its own brand. Because who the heck thinks Hyundai's are good cars? Nobody, right? But Toyota makes great cars. I don't understand why they went to Scion, especially for cheaper cars. Because really, when you think about it, okay, Lexus are fancy Toyotas. Yeah, but they got their own name, Lexus Luxury, right? People thought, who's going to pay 60 grand for a Toyota? And that was probably true back in the day. But they did for Lexuses. But now people are paying 60 grand for Toyotas too, so times change. Little drag strip here. There's nobody behind us, and here we go. Whee! And not a race car, but once you get going, still shifts smooth as a dream. No knocking in the engine. Hey, other than adding oil, there's nothing wrong with this thing. As we drive down, it still handles good in the twisties. I mean, these cars always were a lot of fun to drive around. They just failed because they were a marketing failure. And this particular one does have the bad piston rings on it. But hey, you can see, it still runs like a clock. It's almost at 100% efficiency. It just burns oil. So he's got a gallon of it in the trunk. Hey, Toyota knew what they were doing when they made these 4-speed transmissions. So they don't get 1,000,000 miles a gallon. They're good enough, but they last forever. It gets 30 miles a gallon on the highway, so who cares? Now, if they would have put the 1800 engines like in my Matrix, then they wouldn't have the acceleration they have, but then they wouldn't be burning any oil either. They were going for speed and power, and if they would have made the piston rings correctly, who knows, they might still be selling these things. It gave too many people a bad taste. and it kind of finished them off. A $500 car that gets 30 miles a gallon, yeah, it burns a little oil. Oil's cheap, right? Everything on it still works pretty well. Got lots of space in the hatch when you drop those back seats. So if you're looking for a beater, run around work car, you find something like this that runs as good as this does. Now, if there had been a problem in the engine, other than it just burning the oil, my scan tool would have picked up all kinds of problems, and it didn't have. You saw there were no codes of any sort, and the data was almost perfect for fuel trim. So why not buy one of these if you want a beater car? It's going to still go quite some time, decent gas mileage, really cheap insurance on it, and hey, it's relatively safe. It's got airbags and everything in it, so why not? If you're looking for something like this, when they got dents in them, you can get them cheap, because people are like crows. They like shiny objects, and when they see a dent, they're like, I don't like that car, right? Hey, what do you care if it's your beater car? Then you don't care if somebody bumps into it. You might not even notice it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.